Hi, welcome back to Faith and Conviction. I'm your host, Ray Harris. I want to welcome you to this week's Torah portion, and we are looking at Torah portion 41, and we are in the book of Numbers, where this time we're in chapter 25, verse 10, over to chapter 30, verse 1, or chapter 29, verse 40, depending on which translation that you're looking at. So this Torah portion is named Pincas, or in English we know it as Phinehas, and we are going to be looking at this today. Of course, this is the name of the gentleman named Phinehas, and this Torah portion has a major segment about something that he does, and it has its own challenges and its own rights, but I think you'll like this. I think it has some value, so let's take a look at this. Now, it comes from the book of Bamidbar in Hebrew, which means in the wilderness, but we know the book as Numbers. So our key word comes from chapter 25, verse 11, and it's the first word, Pincas. Now, what we have here is it's connected to Strong's number 6372, and that is Phinehas, who is Eleazar's son, who is Aaron's son. So that makes Phinehas Aaron's grandson. Now, Phinehas comes from two Hebrew words, and that is H6310, H6310, and the other one is H5175. Now, what we have is the first one means mouth, and the next one means serpent. Now, that's actually very interesting because when we go in and we take a look at everything that's going on, this has some interesting effects for us. Now, the serpent means a snake, an image of a serpent, and it is the Hebrew word that's used in Numbers 21, and you find that in verse 6 and verse 7, also in verse 9, where God sent the serpents in, and then we have the image of the serpent that is made. So it's very interesting what's going on here. So why Phinehas has a dual Hebrew word as his name is an interest to me. I can't really explain it other than it provides some interesting imagery. Now, it also says that the Hebrew word for serpent is related to the Hebrew word for sign. Now that becomes very interesting because what we have then is Phinehas having his mouth where he speaks, and then he uses his actions to speak, and it connects over to a sign. Now keep those things in mind when we come down to it. Now the Hebrew word for sign is H5172. I have these down at the end in the web page, so you can take a look at them below. So what do we have? Well, here in chapter 25 we know that Phinehas is going to speak with his actions. So Phinehas sees this Israelite man, and he sees this Midianite woman go in, and they're doing things which God does not want, so their actions are against God, and so Phinehas takes a javelin and runs them through. Now that's open for a whole lot of discussion, and people throughout the ages have provided their commentaries on that. That's not what I want to look at. What I want to look at is down in here that in verse 11, 12, and 13, God said that because of Phinehas' action, the plague has been stopped. So Phinehas hath turned my wrath away, says those verses. Behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace. Then he says the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. So Phinehas really speaks by his actions. And then he becomes a sign. He stops this plague that is taking place. So God says, okay, I'm going to take Phinehas. I'm going to make him a sign himself. I'm going to give him covenant of priesthood and a covenant of peace. So I think this is actually very profound and something that is maybe lost within the discussion. But it is actually so powerful that over in Psalm 106, 30 and 31, Psalm 106, verse 30 and 31, it talks about how Phinehas' action was accounted to him as righteousness. So this actually becomes somewhat important. So I'm not really trying to put an assessment on the action itself. We know that the scriptures reveal this action, and it's pretty profound. But we're trying to look at what happened there and kind of see what his name means. So his name means mouth, or the organ by which you speak, and we're going to take it as a metaphorical speaking, and then you can take it over that he becomes a sign. So also, it's very interesting that in Joshua 22, in that chapter, 11 through the end of the chapter, if I'm not mistaken, there is an issue with the 2.5 tribes east of Jordan. Now, what they're doing is they set up this altar, and the other tribes over here on the western side are going, okay, I don't really know what's going on. And these tribes are going over here to these tribes and saying, we think you're building an altar. And one of those people who go over there representing the priesthood is Phinehas. Now, he helps make sure that these tribes on the east side of the Jordan are not doing something against God. And they said that it is just a sign as a witness, not an altar. So they were using stones to witness those actions and to be a testimony between these tribes and these tribes on either side of Jordan. So it's actually very interesting what Phinehas gets to be observant to and give credibility to as a priest. So again, you could see how his name unfolds, working with the idea of sign. Now, how do we connect this over to the New Testament? Well, this is kind of interesting because we're always trying to take the Hebrew down through the Greek of the Old Testament, down to the Greek of the New Testament, so we can understand it in the English. As I was looking at this, I'm like, okay, we're just studying Phinehas, Pincas. What does he do? Well, this time, instead of looking at the name, I went for the symbology of it. And I think what we can find is something very similar in the book of Philemon, when Paul talks about Onesimus, and then down in verse 11, it says, these two verses say, I beseech you for my son Onesimus, whom I have begotten in my bonds, which in time past was to you unprofitable, but is now profitable. So there's a lot of discussion about what does that mean for Onesimus and slavery and be returning to his slave owner. That's not the point of our discussion. What we're trying to point out is that Paul, when he spent time with Onesimus, helped Onesimus come into realization of what the good news means. And because of that, Onesimus, in his willingness to be a follower of Jesus and a follower of the good news, becomes a man who is different in his character. That's what's important. So the play on the words is he wasn't worth his character, but now he is. Which is similar to what happens to Phinehas. He lives up to a character trait, and God identifies that character and gives Phinehas something very important. So this is important. These are the cool things. These are the things that matter. The interesting thing about names with most of us who are English speaking is a name is a name is a name. We don't think about it as identifying the character of the person. But when we look at the biblical text here, we see two instances that names mean things. And we can see that names indicate their personality. And we can find that all the way back with Abraham when he went from Avraham to Abraham, to Avram to Abraham, Abram to Abraham. There's a difference. There is a major difference between these pronunciations of the words and what they mean, and why it is important that he gets a name change. This is something that we do find in the biblical text. This is something that is powerful to us. I hope it's been a blessing to you this week. Until next time, continue to seek God, know Messiah, find hope.